Toddington Harper. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I've been over and met you in person at Gridserve facilities, Braintree, of course, when it opened, and then more recently in Norwich. And now you have some news about even more stuff you're doing that's new, exciting, going to make a difference. What is it, 360 kilowatt chargers? Can you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, it's just, it's a really exciting innovation. The next generation, if you like, of electric vehicle chargers is amongst us. And we've just completed the commissioning of the first one, which I think is the first one in the United Kingdom, at our Braintree Electric Forecourt in Essex. And I think that makes it the highest power EV charger in the UK. Not that that's so relevant in the context that no vehicle yet can cope with 360 kilowatts of power, although they're getting close, aren't they? 270 kilowatts is what I understand highest can cope with, but it's also a dual charger, so you can dual charge 180 kilowatts at the same time, which is something that today's vehicles can already cope with. And we've also put it in a location. One of the other challenges that we have, that we're asked about is, what about larger vehicles? What about vehicles towing caravans? What about HGVs, heavy goods vehicles? And how's that going to work? And so we thought about that when we were designing the electric forecourt, and we've actually now put the charger in the location which we originally envisaged to be able to charge larger vehicles as well.
Right. Well, can I pick up on something there? Now, dual charging. I've had experience, and I know other people have, perhaps you can help me understand this, where when I've come to use a charger, yours and others, by the way, so I'm not going to pick on you. If someone else is on an adjacent charger, that can sort of seems to seriously reduce the output on occasion and give you sort of various problems. Is that something you're overcoming then, given that you've just described what this charger you're trialing can do? Is there progress in that regard then?
So I think there's a few pieces to that. So what is, I think, fair to say is that we rolled out dual chargers a little bit ahead of when the software was able to really work well with that. The good news is that software has now been rolled out. It wasn't software, so we were kind of keen to see it rolled out as quickly as possible. That's now happened. So in terms of issues with dual charging, they should, hopefully now be resolved. Then the question is, what about power? And the good news, the advantage, if you like, of the charger that we supplied at our electric forecourt in Braintree is we don't have a power issue there. We've got a 5 megawatt grid connection, and so that allows us to demonstrate that site at the full potential. So there is, whether it's dual charging or an individually charging, that charger will be able to pull as much power as is needed, from that grid connection. Issue we have in many other locations is that we don't have yet that amount of power, or the desired amount of power to be able to provide the full extent of what that charger could power a vehicle, let alone two at the same time. The good news is that there is a lot of work going on. We have been able to incrementally increase power. We've also done our first project hybridizing the battery as well, which also helps because you can fill the battery up, and then you can use the power of the battery plus the grid connection to charge vehicles quicker. And in addition to all of that, we're putting in new grid connections as well, which again just allow us to deliver up to the full extent of what the chargers are available to do. And in addition to all of that, we're also delivering dynamic power solutions, which allow you to shift whatever capacity is available to the chargers that need it at that point in time.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's a heck of a list. And I wasn't meaning to rain on your parade, as it were, in talking about that dual charging challenge, but it's good to know that software's, has been rolled out. And one thing that I think that's so exciting is it's almost like we're seeing more innovation with charging, you could argue, than batteries. And I have a long-standing view. I'd love to know whether you would agree with me. Maybe you obviously would. Is that going forward, as we get mass adoption of electric vehicles, it's going to be far better to have ubiquitous, reliable, value for money charging than ever bigger batteries in all of these vehicles. What's your sense and flavor of that kind of metric? You know, more charging or more batteries, or what's the ideal mix? Would you say?
I think we kind of look at it from less from a technology perspective and more from a customer sort of centricity perspective. You know, what we are trying to achieve is that is full confidence in anybody using our charging network, that they'll be able to charge. It will be able to be, you know, that there is no doubt that they won't be able to, ultimately, because they know that the network's very reliable. There will, you know, hopefully be enough chargers in each location so people don't have the anxiety of queuing it excessively. It's going to be incredibly easy to use. It's got a really good customer experience, and that the vehicle will be able to be charged as fast as that, as the battery in that vehicle will accept that power. And so that's what we're trying to achieve, and that's, you know, made possible by a combination of many different aspects, whether it's the charger, the software for the chargers, the grid connection, the power available from that grid connection, hybridizing with batteries where possible, hybridizing with renewable energy as well. And then, you know, taking it further, looking at the location itself and working out how we can optimize queuing at those locations, and so on and so forth. And also looking after the customer, and, you know, while their vehicle is charging, helping them to you know, understand what's available in the local, you know, vicinity, and how they can make the best possible use of the facilities while they're there for the period that they need to, until they need to move on. So yeah, it's kind of a number of points to it, but really we think that, you know, just, you know, first base is removing charging anxiety, and really it's all about trying to deliver the best possible customer experience.
Yeah, no, well, I'd vouch for that absolutely as an EV driver myself, of course. You know, it's not so much now range anxiety. It's in my planned route, my planned stops, is it going to work? You know, shouldn't be that way, but that typically has been. So you're right. You mentioned something in that answer, I just like quickly understand about queuing. Now, if I come to, I suppose, a place like Braintree or Norwich or the others that are opening up soon, you know, you've got 20, 30, whatever, all these different chargers. I can't imagine there's often a queue there, but some of the facilities more around the national motorway network, I think on occasion I have seen people queuing. Is there any kind of software or facility or app where people can take their turn in the queue? Because at the moment, it just seems like you get somewhere, and if, say, there's 5 chargers and 5 cars on it, you park up, you might go and have a word with someone, but there's no kind of protocol really around who's next. And I'm surprised there hasn't been a bit of a bun fight on occasion, where people sort of think they're pushed in or whatever. Is there anything you can do for that to kind of get a little bit more orderly queuing, if I can explain it like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we're giving very careful consideration and thought to.
Oh, good.
Unlike kind of the other infrastructure, like a petrol forecourt, which was designed with the application in mind, most of the places that we're adding chargers to were designed to park electric vehicles rather than to charge electric vehicles. So yeah, there isn't inherent an obvious queuing system. And so when you get to a situation that more people turn up to charge, and people have to wait, where do people queue? How do they queue? What's the fairest way of doing it? You know, are there ways that we can, you know, help customers who are, you know, really in a hurry, desperately need to get somewhere, and people who are quite happy to, you know, to kind of spend half an hour in that location, in any case. And so it requires a lot of thought, and that's what we're doing. So, you know, as an example, so Rugby, Exeter is another good example, is that, you know, 12, 18 months ago, there were very few chargers. Well, Rugby hadn't opened then, so it was a new site. Exeter, as a good example, there was, you know, a couple of chargers. We now we've added 12 high power chargers in addition to 3 medium power chargers that can now dual charge. So there's a lot of charging power available at these locations, but we've already experienced on certain days, you know, bank holidays and so periods where there is overcapacity. More people wanting to charge than is the number of chargers are available, and obviously a big part of addressing that is to put in many new chargers as quickly as we can, and we're doing that as well. But there's a kind of a balance you need to find. You don't want to have huge amounts of chargers that aren't being used very much of the time. Equally, you need to kind of get that balance. The other thing that's quite an interesting consideration here is about time of day, because you can if people are able to to kind of plan their journeys to come outside of peak hours. And the interesting thing that we've discovered is that peak charging on the motorway network follows the sun, as an example, because we know that because we produce solar energy for the network to provide net zero energy. And we've discovered that the production, the shape of the generation actually matches almost precisely the shape of the consumption. So that will kind of give people a good idea of when people turn up to charge. And therefore, if you are able to turn up outside of those periods, if it were possible, it's not always, but if it was, then you're likely not to have queuing to the same level as you would. So, right. so there's quite a lot to consider. There's a lot of, how do you do it? Is it a virtual technical solution? Is it a physical solution? Is it a combination of both? And we're certainly in that detail.
Wow. Well, I mean, clearly it is dynamic, very fast moving, etc. And again, listening carefully to your answer there, because I don't just ask good questions, I hope. I do.
You ask great questions, Roger.
I do listen to the answer as well. So what I'm thinking is when you gave that kind of 24-hour clock sort of thing, I thought, well, hang on. In the same way as I can set my car to charge between midnight and 4 o'clock to get cheaper electricity, can you see a time coming then, Toddington, where you can actively encourage people and kind of spread out that charging regime? I mean, people don't necessarily want to get up out of bed at midnight or 2 in the morning to come and charge. But is there a way in which maybe you can flatten out that demand a little bit more by, I suppose it is called dynamic charging, pricing, dynamic pricing. Is that something you've considered or you might think about?
It's certainly a possibility, and we are absolutely working on the ability to deliver dynamic charging at facilities. Now, we are a guest, if you like, at these facilities. We don't, other than electric forecourts, as you can see in the picture behind me, I'm talking about chargers at MSAs. So, whatever we do needs to be in conjunction with the MSA partners. But what we're doing is providing the technology to be able to do that. And the other kind of variable to this is, there are both larger numbers of people in congestion at different times of day, but equally, as we transition to net zero, there's also different amounts of renewable energy at different times of day. And so there's quite an interesting opportunity to kind of combine those, so for example, if it was going to be a time of low congestion and high supply of energy, maybe it would be in people's interests to offer more competitive pricing at that particular period of time, to both use the best use of the renewable energy when it's available, and also to spread, to spread the kind of load on the and the throughput to those locations. So again, what we're working on is how can we create flexibility? How can we create optionality? How can we deliver the technology to enable these different scenarios to be played out and demonstrated and worked through and optimize over time?
Sure. Wow. Well,